Okay, so I'm gonna read Mockingjay by Susan Collins. Okay, so I know that this is not a typical normal reading, but I may have grammar problems or stuttering problems, but I'm just a student, a college student, working on my speaking skills. So yeah, so here we go. Part 1, The Ashes. I stare down at my shoes, watching as a fine layer of ash settles on the worn leather. This is where the bed I shared with my sister Prim stood. Over there was the kitchen table. The bricks of the chimney was collapsed in a charred heap. Provide a point of reference for the rest of the house. How else could I orientate myself in this sea of gray? Almost nothing remains of District 12. A month ago, the capital's firebombs obliterated the poor coal miners' houses in the scene, the shops in the town, even the Justice Building. The only area that escaped incineration was the Victor's Village. I don't know why exactly. Perhaps so anyone forced to come here on capital business would have somewhere decent to stay. The odd reporter, a committee assessing the condition of the coal mines, a squad of peacekeepers checking for returning refugees. But no one is returning except me, and that's only for a brief visit. The authorities in District 13 were against my coming back. They viewed it as a costly and pointless venture, given that at least a dozen invisible hovercraft are circling overhead for my protection, and there's no intelligence to be gained. I had to see it, though, so much so that I made it a condition of my cooperating with any of their plans. Finally, Holtarch Heavensby, the head game maker, who had organized the rebels in the capital, threw up his hands. Let her go. Better to waste a day than another month. Maybe a little tour of 12 is just what she needs to convince her we're on the same side. The same side. A pain stabs my left temple and I press my hand against it, right on the spot where Joanna Mason hit me with the coil of wire. The memories swirl as I try to sort out what is true and what is fake. What series of events led me to be standing in the ruins of my city? This is hard because the effects of the concussion she gave me haven't completely subsided, and my thoughts still have tendency to jumble together. All of the drugs they use to control my pain and mood sometimes make me see things, I guess. I'm still not entirely convinced that I was hallucinating the night the floor of my hospital room transformed into a carpet of withering snakes. I use a technique of the doctor suggested. I start with the simplest things I know to be true and work toward the more complicated. The list begins to roll in my head. My name is Katniss Everdeen. I am 17 years old. My home is District 12. I was in the Hunger Games. I escaped. The Capitol hates me. Peter was taken prisoner. He is thought to be dead. Most likely he is dead. It is probably best if he is dead. Katniss, should I come down? My best friend Gail's voice reaches me through the headset. The rebels instead I wear. I insisted I wear. He's up in a hovercraft, watching me carefully, ready to swoop in if anything goes amiss. I realize I crouch down, elbows on my thighs, my head grants between my hands. I must look on the verge of some kind of breakdown. This won't do. Not when they're finally weaning me off the medication. I straighten up and wave his offer away. No, I'm fine. I rejoice this. I begin to move away from my old house and toward the town. Gale asked me to drop off in 12 with me, but he didn't force the issue when I refused his company. He understands I don't want anyone with me today, not even him. Some walk she have to take alone. The summer's been scorching hot and dry as a bone. There's been next to no rain to disrupt the piles of ash left by the attack. They shipped here and there in reaction to my footsteps. No breeze to scatter them. I keep my eyes on what I remember as the road because I first landed in the meadow. I wasn't careful and I wasn't walking right into a rock. Only it wasn't a rock, it was someone's skull. It rolled over and over and landed face up, and for a long time I couldn't stop looking at the teeth, wondering whose they were, thinking of how mine would probably look the same way under similar circumstances. I stick to the road out of habit, but it's a bad choice, because it's full of remains of those who tried to flee. Some were incinerated entirely, but others, probably overcome with smoke, escaped the worst of the flames, and now lie reeking in the various streets of decomposition. Caring for scavengers, blanketed by flies, I killed you. I think as I pass a pile, and you, because I did. It was my arrow aimed at the chick in the force field surrounding the arena that brought on this firestorm of retribution that sent the whole country of Panem into chaos. In my head, I hear President Snow's words spoken the morning I was to begin the victor's tour. Katniss Everdeen, the girl who was on fire, you have provided a spark that, left unattended, may grow to an inferno that destroys Panem. It turns out he wasn't exaggerating or simply trying to scare me. He was perhaps genuinely attempting to enlist my help, but I had already set something in motion that I had no ability to control. Burning, still burning, I think numbly. The fires at the coal mines, blenched black smoke in the distance. There's no one left to care, though. More than 90% of the district's population is dead. The remaining 800 or so are refugees in District 13, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the same thing as being homeless forever. I know I shouldn't think that. I know I should be grateful for the way we have been welcomed. Sick, wounded, starving, and empty-handed. Still, I can never get around the fact that District 13 was instrumental in 12's destruction. This does absolutely blame me of blame. There's plenty of blame to go around, but without them, I would not have been part of a larger plot to overthrow the capital, or have been where with all to do it. The citizens of District 12 had no organized resistance movement of their own. No say any of this. They only had the misfortune to have me. Some survivors think it's good luck, though, to be free of District 12 at last, to have escaped the endless hunger and obscuration. The perilous mines, the lash of our final head peacekeeper, Romulus Thread, to have a new home at all is seen as a wonder since up until a short time ago we hadn't even known that District 13 still existed. The credit for the survivors' escape has landed squarely on Gale's shoulders, although he's loath to accept it as soon as the quarter quill was over. As soon as I had been lifted from the arena, the electricity in District 12 was quite cut. The television went black, and the scene became so silent people could hear one another's heartbeats. No one did anything to protest or celebrate what had happened in the arena. Yet within 15 minutes the sky was filled with hoverplanes and the bombs were raining down. It was Gale who thought of the meadow, one of the few places not filled with old wooden homes, embedded with coal dust. He headed those he could in its directions, including my mother and friend. He formed the team that pulled down the fence. Now just a harmless clink chain link barrier with the electricity off, and led the people in the woods. He took them to the only place he could think of, the lake my father had shown me as a child, and it was from there they watched the distant flame eat up everything they knew in the world. By dawn, the bombers were long gone, the fires dying, the final stragglers rounded up. My mother and Prim had set up a medical area for the injured, and they were attempting to treat them with whatever they could glean from the woods. Gail had 2 sets of bows and arrows, 1 hunting knife, 1 fishing net, and over 800 terrified people to feed. With the help of those who were able-bodied, they managed for 3 days, and that's when the hovercraft unexpectedly arrived to evacuate them to District 13, where there were more than enough clean white living compartments, plenty of clothing, and 3 meals a day. The compartments had the disadvantage of being underground. The clothing was identical, and the food was relatively tasteless, but for the refuge of 12, there were minor considerations. They were safe, they were being cared for, they were alive and eagerly welcomed. This enthusiasm was interrupted as kindness, but a man named Dalton, a District 10 refugee, who made it to 13 on foot a few days ago, leaked the real motive to me. They need you, me. They need all of us. A while back there was some sort of pox epidemic that killed a whole bunch of them and left them more infertile. New breeding stock. That's how they see us. Back in 10, he worked on one of the beef ranches, maintaining the genetic diversity of the herd with the implantation of long-frozen cow embryos. He's very likely right about 13, because they don't seem to be nearly enough kids around. But so what? We're not being kept in pens. We're being trained for work. The children are being educated. Those over 14 have been given entry-level ranks in the military and are addressed respectfully as soldier. Every single refugee was granted automatic citizenship by the authorities of 13. Still, I hate them, but of course I hate almost everybody now, myself more than anything. The surface beneath my feet hardens, and under the carpet of ash, I felt the paving stones of the square around the perimeter as a shallow border of refuse. When the shop stood, a heap of blackened rubble has replaced the Justice Building. I walked to approximate site of the bakery Peter's family owned. Nothing much left but the melted lump of the oven. Peter's parents, his 2 older brothers, none of them made it to 13. Fewer than a dozen of what passed for District 12's well-to-do escaped the fire. Peter would have nothing to come home to anyway, except me. I back away from the bakery and bump into something, lose my balance, and find myself sitting on a hunk of sun-heated metal. I puzzle over what it might have been, then remember Fred's recent renovations of the square, stops whipping posts, and this, the remains of the gallows. Bad. This is bad. It brings the flood of images of that torments me, awake or asleep. Peter being tortured, drowned, burned, incinerated, shot, maimed, beaten, as the Capitol tries to get information about the rebellion that he doesn't know. I squeeze my eyes shut and try to reach for him across the hundreds and hundreds of miles, to send my thoughts into his mind, to let him know he is not alone, but he is, and I can't help him. Running away from the square into the one place the fire did not destroy, I pass the wreckage of the mayor's house, where my friend Madge lived. No word of her or her family. Were they evacuated to the Capitol because of her father's position, or left to the flames? Ashes billow up around me, and I pull the hem of my shirt up over my mouth. It's not wondering what I breathe in, but who that threatens to choke me.